Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello everyone, Carrie here, and I am excited to have in my hands the new House Davion Heavy Battle Lance Force Pack. This Force Pack contains a variant of the Thunderbolt, the TDR-9 Naeus, to be specific, and 3 new plastic mechs. The Thanatos, a 75-ton mech that traces its origins to the FedCom Civil War. The Templar, the first Omni-mech designed and built domestically in the Federated Suns. And the Falconer, a 75-ton machine that the Federated Commonwealth designed and built to square off directly against the clans. Before we hop into the Force Pack, I want to remind you to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Also, if you want to support the podcast and are able to afford it, then check out our Patreon at patreon.com/unicorncompany. A link will be in the video description. Now, let's get into it. Like I mentioned earlier, this Force Pack includes a slew of amazing designs, and we are going to start with the only variant mech in the Force Pack, the Thunderbolt. This resculpt of the Thunderbolt is pretty awesome, and not only represents the TDR-9 Naeus, rotary autocannon-toting variant of the mech, but also has something of a nod to the Project Phoenix Thunderbolt by having 2 different heads. The first is the obvious New Classics head, and the second is done in the style of Project Phoenix. On the video I did about the Force Packs when we first got word of them, one of the commenters was Bishop Steiner, who said, and I quote, "Basically we incorporated the Project Phoenix Thunderbolt canopy into the design, being as the 9 Naeus was originally a Project Phoenix variant. I'm guessing Ray insisted we have the option to keep it full classic thud. I truly fear that some want to totally erase Project Phoenix from existence with the return of the classics designs, which is a shame as some have real potential to update like the classics. Not like being unseen didn't mean turd free in OG designs, as the original Metal Thunderbolt was terrible, and all the Osts were hot garbage." I know that might be a hot take, but to be fair, the classic Thunderbolt wasn't the best looking Mini. And while the Project Phoenix Thunderbolt wasn't the prettiest machine, it was an improvement, and to be fair, the problem with the Mini wasn't the sculpt itself, so much as the fact that they got too smart for their own good with the miniature design. Because if I recall correctly, it suffered from what I would like to call the hyperposability of the Project Phoenix designs as they went from paper to metal, and this level of posability required the mechs to be made of a large number of parts, usually with multi-part legs to allow for a variety of poses with an unneeded level of complication. Now let's take a look at this new version of the 9 Naeus Thunderbolt. First of all, about midway through, you'll notice the video changed as I swapped the heads, and I will definitely be using the Project Phoenix version when I have finally built it, and we'll have an extra Thunderbolt head sitting around for whatever. Although I did notice it does look like a battle droid head, like a B1 battle droid. Anyway, looking at the heads, first we have the 2 that I mentioned. Taking a look at both of them, they both have a clip point at the bottom of the peg, which will be hidden, and both have a very minor mold line along the side of the head. The one on the new classic head is pretty much invisible, and on the Project Phoenix version, the side of the head towards the missile launcher does have a slightly raised mold line that should be easily removed. As far as the main portion of the Mini, it is completely the new classic style of design. From the front and leaning it slightly towards me, I can see the mold line on the edge of the shoulder pauldrons, which might be a little bit of a hassle to get to, but look like they are removable. From the front itself, the mech doesn't have a ton of mold lines, though it does have some burring on the front edges of the knuckles and on the outside forward edges of the rotary autocannon housing. From the Thunderbolt's left side, you can see the mold line on the shoulder pauldron, but nothing else really. The rear is pretty clean as well. There is a mold line on the inside edge of the bottom of the mech's right foot. And the only other thing I see, which I think is going to be a pain in the ass, being the clip points on the top of each leg that look like they'll be hard to get to. We then get to the Thunderbolt's right side, which is looking pretty good, though I can catch a glimpse of the mold line on the leading edge of the right arm pauldron, as well as the obvious foot support under the right foot, which I'll probably be carving the majority of away from the miniature. Overall, the Thunderbolt that we get in this force pack is very nice, and will definitely be finding a home in one of my Fed Sons forces as part of the RAC club that is slowly making its way into plastic. As for the Alpha Strike cards for the mech, we get a double-sided card with the TDR9 NAES version as well as the TDR11S. We're going to start with the 9 NAES version of the mech. The TDR9 NAES Thunderbolt is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 2 and movement of 10 inches. It is a skirmisher that comes in at 47 points and is available from the FedCom Civil War era forward. The mech is an impressive short to medium range fighter with damage of 6 at short and medium ranges with no long range damage capabilities, and it doesn't have the ability to overheat. The 9 NAES Thunderbolt has armor of 6 and structure of 3 with specials of case and ECM. This, in my opinion, is an amazing variant of the mech for competitive play. And in casual or campaign play, a player who can get their hands on one of these will have a mech that hits hard and can move quickly enough to engage and disengage targets. The other side of the card has a TDR11S Thunderbolt. This is more of an attrition machine and is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 1 and movement of 8 inches. It is a juggernaut that comes in at 37 points and is available from the Blakest era forward. The mech does 4 damage at short, 3 at medium, and 1 at long with an overheat of 1. For protection, it has 7 armor and 5 structure with an anti-missile system and case. This allows the mech to negate some damage from missile-carrying mechs, as well as the ability to survive an ammunition explosion. As I said when I started talking about it, the 11S is more geared towards surviving as long as it can with its higher armor and structure, as well as the case, which means it will take a more concerted effort to remove from the table, at the cost of raw firepower, though. All right, so which one next? We have 3 amazing, dare I say, awesome options. Sorry, not opinions. Although my opinions are pretty good in my opinion. That's rather circular, but anyway, let's go to the most awesome of the 3, the Templar Omni-Mech. The Templar made its first technical readout appearance in Technical Readout 3067 and was originally released in Field Manual Federated Sons with what I think is some of the best artwork for the machine before it received its redesign. It did receive an attempted glow up in Mechwarrior Dark Age, and while I appreciate their effort, it was, well, not the best look, but did take care of the problem of the Ironwood Metals Mini of the Templar having legs that looked more at home on a goalie than a battle mech, and some of the biggest, most unwieldy arms ever seen on a BattleTech miniature. What we have here is far more proportional and looks so much better overall. Let's take a look at the Mini, though, and see what kind of quality we have. Okay, so first of all, I like what they have done with the mech, and it looks really good at 1 to 2 feet away. As you take a very close look at it, though, from the front, leaning it forward a bit, you can see mold lines on the top of the right arm weapon housing, and on the left arm, on the inside upper part of the weapon housing, you can see a mold line as well. These are mirrored on the bottom of each arm, but aren't severe and should be pretty easy to clean up. On the legs, the upper legs have a slight mold line, not too hard to clean up, with it shifting to the outside hard edges of the lower legs where it is harder to see and looks like it is used to create a hard corner on the frontal leg armor. On the mech's left side, everything looks really clean. The shoulder armor catches my attention, as on the original Templar, they had a relief of a Templar cross. This is done here as well, but with more detail and with the shoulder armor not being drastically huge in comparison to the rest of the mech, like it is on the older metal sculpt. From the rear, you can see the clip points for the legs on the top of them, along with a mold line running down a short distance before it transfers to the edges again. Once again, being used to make hard corners on the model. The clip points and mold line on top of the legs shouldn't be hard to remove. And as far as using it for the hard edges, I kind of like this technique, as the plastic seems to not care for hard edges. Instead, it gives, if you try to make a hard edge with it, it seems to give sort of a soft feel and look to that edge, and this gives very crisp hard corners. Going to the mech's right side, everything is really clean again. You can see the mold line on the bottom of the arm if you lean the miniature away from you. Once again, not too hard to get rid of. Everything else looks really good though. Now, I have to say, when I found out they were doing the Templar, I didn't quite know what to expect, as it had sort of been the ugly duckling of the Inner Sphere Omni-Mechs, which says a lot. And this revamp of the design exceeds every expectation, from the way it's posed to the Templar cross relief on the arms, and even the way it feels more proportional than any of its predecessors. This is the treatment that the Templar deserves. As far as the Alpha Strike cards that we get, the first one is the TLR-1-0 Templar. This is the prime configuration of the mech, and is actually pretty good. It's a battle mech size 4 with a TMM of 1 and movement of 8 inches. The mech is a brawler with a cost of 47 points and is available from the Civil War era forward. The Templar Prime, that's what I'm going to call it anyway, does 6 damage at short and medium ranges with a long of 2 and no overheat value. The mech has 9 armor and 4 structure with specials of Case and Omni. The Templar Prime is in the neighborhood of many similarly priced clan heavies when it comes to firepower and survivability, with the only drawback being its speed, as most similarly armored and armed clan mechs can move at least 10 inches, giving them a TMM of 2. The other configuration we have here is that of Tancred Sandoval, who would inherit rulership of the Draconis March and would also sire the Davion line that gave us Caleb Davion, who would almost single-handedly destroy the armed forces of the Federated Sons at Palmyra. I always pronounce that wrong. The Tancred configuration of the Templar is a battle mech size 4 with a TMM of 1 and movement of 8 inches. The mech is a brawler with a cost of 44 points and is available from the Civil War era forward. This configuration puts out 5 damage at short and medium ranges with 1 at long and an overheat value of 1. The mech has the same armor and structure as the Prime variant and has specials of Case and Omni. This is a configuration I would expect to see in casual or campaign play, as most competitive events don't allow named variants or configurations of mechs. I will say that I find this odd with Omni-Mechs, as you can technically configure them however you want, as long as you haven't pissed off the technicians in your unit. Now, this gets us halfway through the Force Pack, and before we go into the Thanatos and Falconer, I want to mention our sponsor, FortressMiniaturesandGames.com. Fortress has just about anything you need for BattleTech and also carries a variety of other game lines as well as non-BattleTech mecha miniatures. So check them out at FortressMiniaturesandGames.com. Okay, so the next mech we'll be talking about is the Thanatos. Now, this is a mini that I have never owned or even seen before in the wild, so I have to go off images from the internet to see how it looked in metal. From what I can see online, the Thanatos seems to be well scaled, if lacking in some detail when compared to the modern miniature. I may have to pick one up and see how it looks in person though. Looking at the resculpt of the mech, I have to say that I am impressed, as this machine is one that is literally all hard edges, regardless of where you look. I have heard stories and seen where someone claims that they needed to entirely dismember their Thanatos Mini to clean up the mold lines. I'm wondering if that was a QC issue, as it doesn't seem to be as big of a problem on the one I received. There are light mold lines on the top and bottom of each arm, with one on the side torso. It looks like they tried to use them to create hard edges again, but in my opinion weren't as successful as their attempt with the Templar. There are also mold lines on the lower half of the toes, though so far everything I've seen isn't so egregious that it would require me to dismember the mech to clean it up. From the rear, the back of the arms also do have a mold line, all still pretty easy to clean up, and there's a clip point at the top of each leg and on the bottom of the left arm, but not the right. I don't understand that. Overall, I wouldn't say that this is the best work I have seen, but also it isn't very bad either. I think this is a case of the limitations of the casting process, as the mech is well detailed and I would say is average quality overall. As for the Alpha Strike cards that we get with the Mini, we first have the TNS-4S Thanatos. This is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 2 and movement of 10 inches. The mech is a skirmisher with a point value of 46 and is available from the Clan Invasion era forward. The 4S Thanatos does 4 damage at short and medium ranges, with 1 damage at long and no overheat value. The mech has 7 armor and 3 structure, with specials of C3 Slave, ECM, and Mobile Headquarters 1. I have said my opinion on the inherent cost of C3 and Alpha Strike in the past, and feel like this is a beefier than average trooper, with the cost to reflect it. When compared to similar mechs, though, it is competitive, if slightly overpriced, if you're using it outside of a C3 network. The other side of the card is the Thanatos 6S variant. This model is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 1 and movement of 8 ground and 12 jump. The mech is a skirmisher with a cost of 45 points and is available from the Dark Age forward. The 6S has an interesting damage profile with a short and long of 3 and a medium of 4, making it want to stay in that medium range band when engaging enemy units. The mech does have an overheat of 1 and has 7 armor and 4 structure. For specials, it has C3 Slave, Indirect Fire 1, Jump Strong 1, and Mobile Headquarters 1. While this machine can be effective at evading damage when jumping, it also likes to live in the medium range band, making it only so accurate when engaging and staying mobile, as it has less firepower at short range, where being a jumping nuisance would be far more effective. Personally, if I could pick any of the Thanatos variants, it would be the 4T, but then again, I am also inclined to go for stuff without a long range that likes to knife fight. Now, the last of the mechs we will be looking at today is the Falconer. The original Falconer art looked like a champion with enlarged legs, oversized pods on the torso that had a ground effect kit put on it, and had sprouted proper arms. The revamp of the design in TRO 3055 upgrade did some justice to the design, making it look a bit more like its own thing, and it had a feeling of being its own design. The redesign also had the side effect of making the mech look even more squashed and squat, though, with even larger pods on the rear of the torso and almost tucking the design deep between its own legs. This final redesign, though, it's fantastic. Well, as far as the art. We should look at the Mini, though. My overall first impression is that this mech sticks out really far over the front of the hex space due to having its arms slightly extended forward, or angled forward at the shoulder and elbow. The weapons are scaled properly, though. It is just, well, the way they're positioned on the body of the mech, it makes them stick out way too far. I can see this being an issue when used in Alpha Strike if you are trying to get partial cover behind hard cover, as the arms protrude anywhere from 3/4 to a full inch forward of the body of the mech. The other thing that comes to mind is that this iteration of the Falconer seems to have some Marauder DNA in its overall look. This is unavoidable as the machine is either going to look like a Marauder or a Champion, and I think with the popularity of the Marauder, it isn't that bad of a decision. As far as quality, I am surprised to not see mold lines along the tops and bottoms of the arms, though you can feel them. The leg mold lines appear to use the hard corners on the legs to hide them. The biggest thing I can find is the clip point for the torso, which is on the mech's lower right torso. So if it's facing you, it's going to be on your right-hand side. So I guess technically it's the mech's lower left torso. But it's facing you. If you lean the miniature back, you can see it between two of the medium laser ports underneath the torso. This shouldn't be too hard to clean up though, and looking at it from its left side, you can see a slight mold line on the rear of the torso pod, but there isn't anything sticking out to me. The mech's rear has a mold line on the lower part of the left torso pod on a relatively flat surface though, so easy to clean up, and a clip point at the top of each leg. Nothing that is out of the ordinary though, and no noticeable mold lines on the back of the legs. From the mech's right, you can see a mold line on the rear of the right torso pod, which is a bit more noticeable than the one on the left, though it shouldn't be too hard to clean up with a hobby knife. Overall, I like the look of it. I do wish that its arms didn't extend so far out from the body, as otherwise it is a really good miniature. Depending on how hard the arms are to remove, this one might get a little bit of a repose. So let's take a look at the Alpha Strike cards. The first one we have here is the 8R Falconer. This model of the mech is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 2 and movement of 10 jump. It's a skirmisher with a point value of 40 and has been available since the clan invasion era. The 8R does 3 at short and long range and 4 at medium, much like the Thanatos 6S. It also has an overheat of 1. The mech has 6 armor and 3 structure, putting it squarely in Marauder territory for protection, and has no specials. Overall, it isn't a bad design, and I feel like this is a heavy trooper more than anything, as it will want to live in that medium range band, puts out reliable middle of the road damage, and isn't so expensive that it makes you regret bringing it. The other side of the card has the 9R Falconer. This variant is a battle mech size 3 with a TMM of 2 and movement of 10 jump. It is a skirmisher with a cost of 40 points and has been stalking the battlefield since the Blakist era. The mech has an identical damage and armor profile to the 8R, though this time it has a special of Flak 111. Now, while I usually go with the older design, this is one where, given that they are virtually identical except for the special ability, I would go with the 9R here, as it has a bit more utility with the Flak special ability, which can come in quite handy when your opponent drops a pair of Balaks on your... stupid Balaks. One funny thing I do want to mention is that even though the Falconer is a good base platform, before we even start talking about the weapons loadout, this is a mech that hasn't received too much love when it comes to variants, as the two I just told you about are the only 2 Falconer variants in the game. So, I mean, that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the miniatures themselves, quality-wise and everything. So, having looked at the Force Pack, what do I think? Well, overall, I like what we get here. The 3 new mechs in the Force Pack are all welcome to the plastic mech family as far as quality. I think that on a couple, they hit it out of the park, the Templar and Thunderbolt, and the other 2 are average, on the higher end of average for the Falconer and normal average for the Thanatos. The head swap option is a nice touch for the Thunderbolt, and I'm glad to see Catalyst including little things like this in the newer Force Packs, as I and I'm sure many other players enjoy having some options when it comes to having variety with their mechs. And also, some of the people who thought that not all Project Phoenix designs were bad and maybe deserved some kind of callback, especially on the Thunderbolt, as the 9 Naeus variant came out of that technical readout and is one of the best Thunderbolt variants in the game. The Force Pack itself costs $29.99 and is $22.49 through Fortress Miniatures and Games. And when I began writing this and took the screenshot for the Force Pack, it was in stock, but as of right now, it is out of stock. These new Force Packs are flying off the shelves, online and at brick and mortar stores. And I feel like this, and apparently the fact that BattleTech is now the second largest selling miniatures game, is just more proof that Catalyst is bringing BattleTech into the future stronger than it has ever been before. Until next time, this is Carrie, signing off. I want to thank all of our patrons who help make this possible. First, at Captain, we have Sarah. And then our lieutenants, Boy in a Box, Gus, Haley, Nathan, and Will. And then our sergeants, BZ Archer, Faz, Steven, and finally our cadets, NB Kaiju, Housemaster Poding, Jamie, and Scott. Thank you all so much for supporting the podcast and the channel. You all make this so possible. Also, I do want to mention once again our sponsor and mercenary liaison, FortressMiniaturesandGames.com. Stupid Balax.